I know how frustrating it is to get a flat and boring artwork. You're trying to nail the lights and shadows, and still hours in,
Oh my God!
and they look pretty much the same, with repetitive values like it's a medieval poster. Maybe you're applying the blackest black you could put your hands on in spots where you know there need to be shadows. They look like black holes, meanwhile the tip of the pencil transpassing dimensions, and you just can't further darken it. So, before directly making the mistake of detailing everything right from the start, risking getting equal values, and also if you think that everything I just mentioned sounds familiar, it happens that I got a solution for you. In short, light direction and doors. It will make you understand and better define the surface's inclinations by choosing the right values for them. Okay, so, light direction and doors. First, there has to be an established light source. Knowing that light is reflected only in straight lines, and bouncing in the surroundings, landing on exposed surfaces. Now what I mean by doors, imagine two rooms separated by one door. The first room is dark, while the second room is fully illuminated. As the door is facing directly to the light bulb as a flat surface, will have the lightest value in this situation. Now imagine it opens frame by frame, facing on each frame away from the light source. It gradually will become darker. Let's use this logic on a random object and apply three main planes on which there are going to be three main categories of values when breaking everything down to its most abstract foundation. Okay, frame 1, the lights, where surfaces are directly getting hit by the light source. Frame 2, halftones. They are slightly darker values, and they are still facing and getting punched by the light, but not directly. The light is more kind of rubbing those surfaces, passing by them, so to speak. They are like the bridge between the lights and the darks. And lastly, the last frame, where planes are turned away or blocking the light passage, the shadows, which are also getting value variations because a bit of light is still subtly influencing some areas. They also known to be called reflections. Keep the borders of these families readable and don't blend them at this stage to make things easy to read and provide a solid foundation that will be modeled as we progress. Now give it up to the values meter. Okay, so remember, light comes always in straight lines. This reference will help you to determine which planes are visibly getting affected by it and how much, depending on the direction they are facing in relation to the light source. And ultimately, it will help you classify a certain range of values onto specific planes. So this shading tier will guide us to do just that, while also aiding in dodging value repetitions that make every artwork look like it's floating. Because in nature, you'll never find perfect whites, making exception to the ultimate source of light, which is the sun, or perfect black, only found in a sealed room without the smallest hole in which light can pass through.
Am I a joke to you?
Therefore, it will be fine to use this range as the base lights and this spot as the base shadow, as we'll add darker spots down the line. And a good advice would be to keep distance between these two incompatible kingdoms and avoid using this space between them to maintain coherency. And in the end, every complicated and polished-looking object will be reverse-engineered and geometrized, and it would look like as if it would be made out of wood with roughly cut edges. Say a tree, okay? With all its leaves and branches, you can transform his head into some spheres and its trunk into a cylinder, for example, then roughly cut their surfaces and get guided by the light. Just simplify everything it contains into simple shapes. Now, after simplifying the main form and organizing the main value families, it's safe to solve each family planes and halftones at a time. Okay, Now let's work on the darker surfaces inclinations exclusively where the light family is, just to be aware and avoid bleeding into the darker values. In the dark part, we're going to deal with the halftones of that area. They are also known as ambient light or reflections. Personally, I like to call them anti-halftones. It sounds edgy and my guilty pleasure is to get cringed. They are usually darker comparative to the halftones in the light part, but in the same time they are lighter compared to the core shadow. The ambient light is actually the little amount of light that remained after traveling the ambient in straight lines and losing their potency the further they travel, and they get into land on the surface that is happened to be turned away or covered from the light source. Consider using also as reference the direction in which the light is coming from, so it will be easier to remember where the ambient light is most likely to land on. Because reflections can be found almost on any surface, especially on those close to the edges of any object, but in some places they will be a bit more prominent. And now at this stage, compare the level of brightness between the planes that have the same angle in the shadows and repeat the same comparison between those in the light. Maybe they are a bit further from the light source, which will make them slightly darker. So what you can do is very simple. Just add a fine layer of a darker value to it and that's it. All you have to do is to analyze the values between the reflections and the halftones for repetitions and use the fine layer technique again if necessary. And now, for my favorite part, the highlights and the ambient occlusion. This one's supposed to be the final stage that we have to handle. So let's first deal with the ambient occlusion. But what is actually the ambient occlusion? Well, these places are actually the deepest surfaces where light can hardly infiltrate. So all you want to use is the darkest value compared to what was used till that point. Usually you can also find ambient occlusions between two objects, let's say, so close to each other that the space between them there is no chance of a single light particle to get into. And now, by adding the highlights in a very controlled manner, we're gonna do it only on the spots that are the most, let's say, pointy or exposed, or where they are very directly facing to the light source. This part is very short, but it makes the whole impact. The sparkly highlights and the ambient occlusion, it's what actually makes the work pop and adds mass to it, materiality, volume, depth. It just brings life into the artwork. So here you go, you got yourself the general lights, general shadows, halftones, reflections, ambient occlusions, and highlights. This is where you should have a very consistent artwork when it comes to values. Thank you for clicking on this video in the first place. Don't forget to let yourself get inspired, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.